You're more healed than you think. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Healing works the same way. It unfolds quietly, uniquely, and often without you even realizing it. Sometimes, the very peace you feel today is the proof of the battles you've already won. In this video, we'll explore the subtle, hidden signs that you've grown far more than you think. So as you watch, reflect on your own journey. What moment showed you that your spirit has already begun to heal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's inspire one another on this path of spiritual wisdom and awakening. 1. Comfort in solitude. When you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts, you've entered one of the quietest and most profound stages of healing. There's a calm that comes when you stop chasing distractions and learn to find peace in your own company. This isn't loneliness, it's recognition. It's the moment when you realize that your mind is no longer an enemy, but a companion, and silence has become sacred instead of unbearable. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls, and yet here you are, sitting with yours without resistance. That is the essence of spiritual awakening. The moment you stop running from yourself and begin to understand that the peace you were seeking outside has always lived within. The journey into solitude used to feel like exile, a void you tried to fill with noise, validation, or endless movement. But now, solitude feels like home. You've met the parts of yourself you once buried: the pain, the doubt, the hidden memories, and instead of rejecting them, you've embraced them with compassion. You've looked into the mirror of your own consciousness and said, "I see you and I accept you." That is shadow integration, the core of Jung's psychology and the soul of spirituality. It's the recognition that healing isn't about becoming flawless. It's about befriending every fragment of who you are. When you begin to enjoy your own presence, something miraculous happens. The constant craving for validation dissolves. You no longer need someone else's attention to feel alive. You stop measuring your worth by how many people notice you or how much noise fills your days. Instead, you become aware of the quiet rhythm of your inner being, the slow, sacred heartbeat of your own existence. You realize that solitude isn't emptiness, but space. The space where your soul can breathe, where intuition speaks, and where divine wisdom whispers truths the world is too loud to hear. This stage of spiritual growth doesn't announce itself with celebration. It doesn't look like victory or feel like revelation. It unfolds softly, like dawn light through a curtain, subtle, yet undeniable. You catch yourself at peace on a Sunday morning, unbothered by the silence that once made you anxious. You sit still, and instead of reaching for your phone or the next distraction, you listen. You notice your breath, your thoughts, your presence. And in that noticing, you meet something eternal. You realize that healing was never about fixing what was broken. It was about remembering who you've always been beneath the noise. To be comfortable in solitude means you've stopped fearing your own reflection. You've learned that even your pain carries wisdom, that your past no longer holds you captive, and that silence is the purest form of truth. The person who once couldn't stand being alone is now someone who thrives in stillness. And that, in itself, is the greatest sign of spiritual awakening. You are more healed than you think. not because the world around you changed, but because you finally made peace with the world within. Have you ever found peace in being alone? Solitude isn't emptiness. It's where your soul learns to breathe. If you've experienced a moment of comfort in your own company, share it in the comments so others can be inspired by your journey. And if you're still learning to embrace solitude, comment below. I'm ready to find peace within, so we can walk this path of healing and spiritual awakening together. 2. Triggers losing power. When the situations that once shattered you now only stir a quiet wave within, it's no longer a coincidence, it's a revelation of spiritual growth. You may still feel that brief ache when something brushes against an old wound, but it doesn't drown you anymore. It moves through you, and then it's gone. That's the soul's way of showing that the pain has been integrated, that the past no longer holds the authority to define your present. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And now, you're living the proof of that wisdom. The patterns that once pulled your strings are losing their power because you have stopped identifying with the story of your suffering. You've stepped into awareness of the sacred space where reaction transforms into response and chaos turns into clarity. You see, spirituality is not about becoming untouchable or emotionless. It's about reclaiming your peace from the places where you once lost it. It's about realizing that triggers are not enemies, but messengers, reminders of what still needs your compassion, not your control. When someone criticizes you, and instead of shrinking, you breathe and see their projection for what it is that's healing. When disappointment comes, and instead of despair, you remind yourself that life unfolds according to divine timing, that's maturity. The storms may still come, but you've built a foundation that doesn't collapse. You're no longer asking, "Why me?" but whispering, "What is this teaching me?" That subtle shift is where true spiritual awakening begins, when you stop chasing validation, stop rehearsing pain, and start living from inner trust. Each time you pause instead of react, you are rewriting your story. Each moment you stay calm, where you once would have broken, you are reclaiming your power from the unconscious. Healing doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows itself through your silence, your restraint, your ability to stand in presence without defending your worth. Your growth hides in these ordinary moments, in the grace with which you forgive, the ease with which you release, and the strength with which you stay soft in a hard world. And though you might not see it, every time you choose peace over drama, compassion over bitterness, awareness over impulse, you are living proof that your soul has evolved. This is the invisible beauty of spiritual growth. Not the absence of triggers, but the mastery over them. Not the end of emotion, but the transformation of energy. You have become conscious of the very things that once controlled you, and that consciousness itself is freedom. You are learning that healing doesn't mean forgetting the storm. It means remembering your strength. And through that quiet strength, your spirit has become untouchable, not by building walls, but by expanding beyond them. 3. Embracing paradox. You know you've reached a quiet depth of healing when you can hold contradictions inside you without falling apart. You can love someone deeply and still feel frustrated by them. You can be grateful for what you have and yet still dream of more. You can feel strong and still admit that you're uncertain. That's not weakness. It's the essence of what Carl Jung called psychological maturity, the sacred ability to be whole instead of perfect. Perfection is sterile, but wholeness is alive. It's the moment you realize that opposites can coexist in harmony, and that light can only exist because of shadow. Jung once said, "The paradox is one of our most valuable spiritual possessions, because it teaches us that inner peace doesn't come from erasing conflict, but from integrating it." There was a time when you might have thought healing meant becoming only calm, only kind, only positive. But now you understand that real healing is the ability to stand in the middle of contradiction without losing yourself. It's when you stop fighting your sadness and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. It's when you can forgive someone without denying the pain they caused. Spiritual wisdom isn't about choosing one side of life over the other. It's about seeing that both darkness and light are part of the same divine truth. The deeper you go, the more you realize that every emotion, even the painful ones, carries a message from your soul asking to be understood. Think about how far you've come. Once, you might have seen things in extremes, good or bad, success or failure, right or wrong. But now, you can breathe in the space between them. You've learned that life isn't meant to be solved like a puzzle, but embraced like a mystery. You no longer panic when uncertainty visits. You simply let it sit beside you and whisper its lessons. Jung believed that the path of awakening begins when we stop rejecting parts of ourselves. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what you've done. You've started to see your anger as passion misdirected, your fear as a signpost toward growth, your pain as a doorway to truth. When you can hold two truths at once without needing to choose, you've already stepped into mastery. You've discovered that you can be both tender and powerful, both grounded and wild, both human and divine. You've stopped chasing the illusion of being fixed because you now understand you were never truly broken. You were just learning how to hold your opposites in love. That's what Carl Jung meant by integrating the process of uniting the conscious and the unconscious, the sacred and the flawed, until they dance together as one. So when you find yourself loving and doubting, forgiving and hurting, surrendering and resisting all at once, don't rush to correct it. Just notice it. That's your soul evolving quietly, growing stronger in silence. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or revelation. It's the slow expansion of your capacity to hold life as it is. The moment you can say, "I am both," and feel peace in that truth, you have already touched the heart of spiritual awakening and embodied the rare spiritual wisdom that Carl Jung spent his life trying to illuminate. Comment below, "I embrace the paradox," if you're ready to find peace in life's contradictions and see how your inner growth has been quietly unfolding all along. 4. Freedom from projections. When you begin to awaken spiritually, something remarkable happens. You stop letting other people's opinions shape your reality. You no longer live under the weight of their judgments or carry their insecurities as your own. You start to see clearly where you end and others begin. As Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That simple truth becomes a compass for your awakening. You recognize that when someone projects their fears onto you, it has nothing to do with your essence and everything to do with their unhealed pain. You no longer absorb their energy. You let it pass through like a wave dissolving on the shore. What once felt like a personal attack now feels like information evidence of another person's inner struggle, and you move with quiet awareness rather than emotional reactivity. This is not detachment born from indifference, but wisdom born from clarity. You start to feel when someone's words carry the vibration of their wounds. Instead of defending yourself, you remain centered. Instead of explaining your worth, you rest in it. This is the power of spiritual awakening. It refines your boundaries without hardening your heart. You realize that not every criticism deserves a response, and not every projection deserves your energy. People can only see you through the filters of their own consciousness. Their perception is not your responsibility. The more you embody this truth, the freer you become. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But when you see projections for what they truly are, you stop living by other people's unconscious stories and start living by your own awareness. That is emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain rooted in your own energy no matter what others send your way. True healing, as Jung taught, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself in loud transformations. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, in the moments where you would have once been triggered but now remain calm. You might still feel the old sensations rise, the pulse quickening, the urge to explain, but instead of reacting, you breathe. You witness. You choose peace over chaos. That's how you know growth has happened. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you learned how to stay centered through the feeling. Your silence becomes strength. Your boundaries become sacred. You realize that self-respect is not about building walls. It's about knowing the value of your energy and protecting it with love. Through this stage of spiritual awakening, you stop needing everyone to understand you. You stop performing for approval. The praise no longer inflates you, and the criticism no longer wounds you. You exist in a deeper rhythm now, one guided by inner truth rather than outer validation. The judgments of others no longer define your identity because you have learned to define yourself through presence, awareness, and compassion. This is freedom from projections, the kind of freedom that can't be taken away because it comes from within. It's the moment you realize you are no longer who the world told you to be. You are who your soul has always known you were. In that realization lies one of the most profound signs of hidden growth Carl Jung ever described. The awakening of a consciousness so radiant that the shadows of others can no longer touch your light. 5. Dream transformation. One of the most revealing signs of inner healing is when the tone of your dreams begins to change. You may not even realize it at first, but the chaos that once filled your nights slowly turns into calm. The fear that used to chase you becomes curiosity, and the darkness that once swallowed you starts to open into light. This is not a coincidence. It is the voice of your unconscious reorganizing itself after years of inner conflict. According to Carl Jung, dreams are the purest expressions of the soul. They are messages written in the language of symbols, showing us what words cannot express. When your dreams begin to shift from chaos to exploration, It means that something deep inside you has started to trust life again. Perhaps you used to dream of running away, of being lost, of facing shadows you could not escape. But now, instead of running, you stand your ground. You walk through that same dark forest, not as a victim, but as a seeker. You enter the same house that once terrified you and discover that behind its locked doors are rooms filled with warmth and light. These changes are not just about the dreams themselves. They are evidence that your psyche is healing, that your soul has accepted its own wholeness. This is what true spiritual growth looks like: silent but profound, invisible but powerful. It happens beneath the surface, as your unconscious mind learns to live in harmony with your conscious self. Healing does not always mean that the pain disappears. As Jung said, healing is not about curing, it's about making whole. You may still remember your wounds, but they no longer define you. The energy that once created nightmares now gives birth to symbols of renewal. The same emotions that once overwhelmed you now become guides, leading you toward deeper understanding. In this new stage of spirituality, your dreams become a sacred classroom where the soul teaches through imagery and feeling. They reflect your progress more honestly than your waking mind ever could. When you dream of reconciling with someone who once hurt you, or when an old fear no longer makes you panic, it's your unconscious celebrating its peace. The dream world becomes a mirror of your inner harmony, showing that your spiritual awakening has reached a new depth. You no longer need to fight or flee. You are able to observe, to feel, and to let go. The boundaries between darkness and light begin to dissolve because you now understand they are both part of the same truth. Your unconscious is not your enemy. It is your oldest companion. And as you heal, it starts to trust you again. The chaos in your dreams settles because your inner world no longer needs to scream to be heard. The fears that once haunted you now transform into symbols of wisdom. You might wake up remembering a dream where you fly, swim in clear water, or walk through golden light. These are not random images, but the language of your soul telling you you are safe now. This transformation in your dream landscape is a reflection of your spiritual growth. It shows that the layers of your being, body, mind, and spirit, are beginning to move in the same rhythm. The more peaceful your inner world becomes, the more harmony you will see both in your dreams and your waking life. The night no longer hides your fears. It reveals your healing. And that silent transformation, often unnoticed, is one of the clearest signs that you are far more healed than you think. Leave your like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any powerful insights that awaken your dreams into transformation. Comment below, "I am transforming through every dream," to affirm your journey toward hidden healing and spiritual growth. 6. Peace with the shadow. You've stopped fighting your darker impulses, and that's one of the clearest signs you're far more healed than you think. There was a time when you might have seen jealousy, anger, or selfishness as proof that something was wrong with you. You tried to suppress them, hide them, or pray them away, thinking that being spiritual meant being spotless. But real healing, as Carl Jung's Spiritual Wisdom reminds us, isn't about erasing the darkness. It's about embracing it. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung once said, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you stop denying those hidden parts of yourself and begin to understand them, you stop being ruled by them. That's when your shadow starts transforming from a prison into a source of profound insight. The moment you can observe your anger without being consumed by it, when you can feel jealousy without letting it poison your peace, you reclaim a power that's deeper than self-control. It's self-awareness. You begin to see that every emotion has a purpose, that your anger often points to your boundaries, your jealousy reveals your suppressed desires, and even your selfishness teaches you to protect your energy. Through this understanding, what once felt like weakness slowly becomes wisdom. The fire that used to burn you now lights your path. The emotions that used to shame you now show you where you still need love. Jung believed that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And through that pain, you've begun to awaken the light that was hidden within your own darkness. You've also noticed that life no longer triggers you the way it once did. The people or situations that used to send you into spirals of self-doubt or emotional chaos now meet a calmer, wiser version of you. You no longer react. You reflect. You don't rush to prove your goodness or defend your worth, because you've realized that true peace doesn't come from appearing perfect, but from being whole. That's the essence of spiritual awakening, the quiet understanding that you can hold both light and shadow without rejecting either. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That subtle shift is the mark of inner maturity, the moment when your shadow no longer controls you because it no longer needs to. Carl Jung taught that every person contains both divine light and sacred darkness, and the integration of the two is what leads to transformation. As you learn to make peace with your shadow, you begin to see how everything you once judged in yourself was actually guiding you toward wisdom. Your sensitivity becomes compassion. Your guilt becomes empathy. Your past mistakes turn into understanding. Even your wounds begin to glow softly with meaning. This harmony between what you once loved and what you once feared within yourself is the very definition of healing. You may not have realized it yet, but your quiet acceptance, your calm response, and your ability to find light in what once scared you, all of that means you're already more healed, more awake, and more whole than you ever thought possible. 7. Renewed meaning. You begin to sense that life has quietly come back to life within you, not through any grand achievement, but through the sacred simplicity of being. There's a calm pulse of meaning behind even the smallest actions: when you breathe, when you listen, when you smile for no reason at all. This is the silent sign of deep healing. You are no longer chasing happiness. You are embodying it. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And in this awakening, you realize that spirituality isn't about escaping reality, but falling in love with it again. You start to find joy, not in doing more, but in being more present. There's a quiet richness in washing a cup, feeling the warmth of sunlight, or simply existing without needing anything to prove your worth. The noise of the world fades, and a deeper rhythm begins to move through you, a rhythm that feels ancient, peaceful, and alive. The more you awaken, the more you notice that purpose is no longer something you must chase. It begins to flow naturally when you create from the heart, when you serve without needing recognition, when you connect with others and feel the pulse of shared humanity. The divine is no longer distant. It lives through your hands, your voice, your breath. You can feel the invisible harmony between your inner world and the outer one, as if life itself has become a mirror reflecting your healed energy. Jung believed the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now that truth lives inside you, you no longer seek to become someone else. You simply allow your truest essence to unfold. In this deepened state of awareness, patterns start to appear where before you saw only randomness. Synchronicities begin to weave through your days, small moments that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidence. You think of someone, and they call. You feel lost, and the right message appears in front of you. You sense that something, somewhere, is guiding you. This isn't wishful thinking. It's the universe responding to your healed vibration. You are finally in resonance with life itself. The language of the divine has always been timing, alignment, and intuition, and now you are fluent in it. You start to understand that divine timing was never working against you. It was shaping you. Every detour, heartbreak, and silence was part of the sacred choreography of your becoming. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," and now that truth feels real. The pain that once felt unbearable has turned into wisdom. The moments that once broke, you have become the very soil where compassion grew. You no longer curse your past. You honor it, for it built the foundation of your awakening. You see how the pieces fit, how everything had meaning, and how your spirit was never abandoned, only refined. Now, even the ordinary feels miraculous. You find beauty in quiet mornings, depth in simple conversations, and gratitude in the smallest details. The world hasn't suddenly become easier, but you have become softer, wiser, freer. You are no longer surviving. You are creating, connecting, and existing with awareness. You can feel the universe, or consciousness itself, breathing through you, guiding you with every beat of your heart. This is what real healing feels like, not perfection, but presence. Not constant happiness, but quiet peace. Not needing to prove that you're healed, because your very existence radiates it. You realize that spirituality is not somewhere you go. It is what you are when you remember your wholeness. Life begins to feel sacred again, and that is the ultimate sign of your spiritual awakening. We hope this reflection on finding renewed meaning through hidden healing has inspired you to see your journey with fresh eyes. If you're ready to rediscover purpose and align your life with deeper spiritual wisdom, comment below, "I'm renewed." Your engagement helps us share more insights that awaken growth and understanding within you. Sometimes healing doesn't look like joy or clarity. It looks like peace where there used to be pain, silence where there used to be chaos. You're more healed than you think, and every quiet step forward is proof of your unseen growth. If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos about inner transformation and the hidden power within you. When the empath walks away silently, the universe responds with fury. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. These words echo deeply in the hearts of empaths who have given everything love, energy, and understanding to people who could never truly see their worth. But when an empath finally walks away in silence, something extraordinary happens. The universe takes notice. The balance of energy shifts, and everything that was once taken for granted begins to collapse or transform. This video on spiritual wisdom reveals the mysterious and spiritual truth behind what Carl Jung called the withdrawal of projection, the moment you reclaim your power and the world responds. Have you ever experienced the universe reacting after you walked away from someone or something? Share your story in the comments below, and let's awaken together to the higher meaning of letting go. 1. The psychological nature of the quiet exit. Carl Jung once described the withdrawal of projections as one of the most profound psychological shifts in human relationships. When an empath silently walks away, it's not an act of revenge or pride, but a spiritual awakening born from exhaustion and clarity. For years, the empath has carried emotional weight that was never theirs to hold, offering endless explanations, forgiveness, and compassion to those who only took without truly seeing. But there comes a moment when the soul grows tired of bleeding for others, when peace becomes more valuable than connection, and silence becomes the loudest declaration of truth. In that quiet detachment, the empath stops being emotionally available, stops saving others from the consequences of their own actions, and stops being the mirror through which others avoid seeing their flaws. It is in this withdrawal that Jung's theory comes alive. The empath's absence forces others to confront their own shadows, their pain, and their unhealed wounds that were long disguised by the presence of someone endlessly patient. The silence of the empath is not empty. It is full of truth, full of power, and full of meaning. It is a sacred space where energy recalibrates itself. When the empath no longer explains or defends, the world that once relied on their light begins to feel the coldness of its own darkness. The person who once took their warmth for granted begins to feel the void left behind, and in that void, they meet themselves. This is the fury of the universe, not anger in the human sense, but a cosmic rebalancing, an energetic correction. What was hidden beneath emotional dependency now rises to the surface. The absence of the empath becomes the teacher, forcing the other person to awaken or remain trapped in denial. This process is not punishment, but purification. It's how the universe restores harmony to relationships that were built on imbalance. Through this silence, the empath reclaims their power, remembering that their role was never to save others, but to awaken themselves. In the field of spirituality and spiritual awakening, this moment marks a turning point. The empath begins to understand that love without boundaries leads to depletion, that kindness without discernment leads to self-erasure, and that true compassion must begin with self-respect. Walking away, then, is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that energy must flow both ways or not at all. And when that flow stops, the universe intervenes, using the empath's departure as the catalyst for growth in everyone involved. The one who walks away learns the beauty of stillness, the serenity of detachment, and the quiet power of saying nothing. The one who is left behind is given a mirror, painful, honest, and transformative. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When the empath withdraws, the unconscious becomes visible. What was once denied now demands healing. What was once taken for granted now becomes a lesson. This is why the universe responds with intensity when an empath walks away silently. It's not fury against the empath, but fury against delusion. The silent exit breaks cycles that words never could. It ends emotional patterns that logic could never touch. The empath's silence is both a boundary and a blessing. It teaches through absence what presence could not achieve. And in this process, both sides evolve. The empath rises into alignment with their higher self, while the other is left to confront the spiritual truth they had long ignored. This is not a story of loss. It's a story of balance, a sacred dance between energy, consciousness, and transformation. It's how the universe restores order when love has been misused, and how silence becomes the voice of the soul reclaiming its divine peace. 2. The empath as a psychological container. Empaths are not just sensitive souls. They are emotional alchemists, spiritual containers who unconsciously absorb the pain, anger, and despair of others. Their hearts act like magnets for human suffering, pulling in what others cannot handle and transforming it through silent compassion. What begins as kindness often turns into servitude. Their empathy becomes emotional labor for those who offer only conditional love in return. Love that says, "I'll stay as long as you keep healing me." This creates a subtle form of bondage, a codependent cycle where the empath gives endlessly while receiving only crumbs of appreciation. In the name of peace, they learn to carry the chaos of others, mistaking exhaustion for love and silence for strength. They become addicted to being needed, believing their purpose lies in saving everyone but themselves. Yet in truth, the more they absorb, the less space they have for their own light to breathe. Over time, this quiet self-abandonment begins to weigh on the soul. The empath's inner world becomes cluttered with emotions that are not theirs: unresolved pain, hidden rage, forgotten dreams. Their body holds it, their energy field mirrors it, and their spirit whispers for release. Jung would say they have become a vessel for the collective unconscious, holding not only personal suffering, but the emotional shadows of humanity. And while this gift can be sacred, it is also dangerous when unbalanced. Because an empath's open heart becomes a portal without boundaries, everything flows in. Others sense it instinctively. They come to the empath for comfort, validation, and healing, not realizing that every time they do, they are drawing from a well that must eventually run dry. When the empath finally awakens, something shifts. There comes a moment when they no longer wish to carry what isn't theirs. They begin to see that true spirituality is not about absorbing darkness, but transmuting it through awareness. They understand that compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal. And so, without anger or announcement, they walk away. They choose silence not as an escape, but as an act of sacred rebellion. This silence speaks louder than words, echoing through the energetic fabric of the universe. The people who once leaned on their light suddenly feel the weight of their own unhealed wounds. The balance of energy that was once distorted begins to correct itself, and the universe, in its wisdom, responds with fury, not punishment, but justice. It tears down the illusions that sustained false connections, forcing everyone involved to confront their truth. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, awakening means seeing how unconscious patterns of overgiving have shaped every relationship. It means realizing that love is not sacrifice, it is equilibrium. The act of walking away becomes the highest expression of spiritual growth. It is the soul reclaiming its space, saying, "I choose to heal without losing myself." In that moment, the empath transforms from a container of pain into a conduit of higher consciousness. They stop carrying the world's suffering and begin radiating pure presence. Their energy, once scattered, becomes centered. Their silence becomes strength, and their detachment becomes divine alignment. What was once servitude becomes sovereignty. What was once emotional exhaustion becomes clarity. And the empath, having learned the sacred balance between compassion and self-respect, finally understands that walking away is not an ending. It is a return to self, a powerful act of spirituality that restores harmony to the soul and to the universe itself. 3. Stages of empathic individuation. The empath's awakening is a sacred rebellion against self-betrayal. When the empath walks away silently, it is not an act of cruelty, but a deep act of spiritual wisdom, an unspoken declaration that the soul can no longer survive in places that demand its light without offering warmth in return. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, this moment of awakening is when they finally see how they've been living under the spell of emotional servitude, mistaken as love, and begin to reclaim their power through the 5 stages of empathic individuation. The first stage is clarity, a piercing realization that they have been valued for their emotional labor, not their being. They see how they have been reduced to a function, endlessly providing peace, comfort, and healing, while silently bleeding within. In this moment of clarity, they begin the process Jung called shadow integration, acknowledging the part of themselves that needed to be needed, that equated love with sacrifice, that mistook exhaustion for devotion. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung wrote, and the empath's clarity is indeed painful because it requires seeing the truth. They have betrayed themselves in the name of love. With this awakening comes reorientation. The empath begins to pull back their energy, redirecting it inward instead of constantly outward. The once restless caretaker becomes still, listening for the quiet pulse of their own desires. They begin to understand that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction dressed as kindness. This turning inward is not selfishness, it is healing. They stop explaining, stop overgiving, stop apologizing for their sensitivity, and instead honor it as sacred. In this silence, they start to feel themselves returning home. Jung described this process as becoming the person you were always meant to be. And in this stage, the empath starts to remember who that truly is. Then comes the vacuum effect, a strange and powerful silence that ripples through every relationship they once sustained. When the empath stops carrying the emotional weight of others, the world around them begins to shake. Those who depended on their light feel the void because their own shadows can no longer hide behind the empath's energy. The empath's absence becomes a mirror, reflecting the emotional imbalance that had always existed. This silence is not empty, it is charged with power, and the universe begins to respond. Those who once took advantage begin to feel exposed, confused, and even angry, but this chaos is divine rebalancing, not punishment. As the empath holds their silence, psychological accountability emerges. Without the empath's constant soothing, people are forced to confront their own behavior. The emotional scaffolding collapses, and what remains are raw truths: who truly loves and who only loved the benefits. This stage can feel brutal, but it is also liberating. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Yet the empath's silence leaves no room for avoidance. It compels everyone to meet themselves honestly. The empath no longer cushions lies, no longer mediates other people's chaos, no longer trades their peace for acceptance. Finally, there is psychological sovereignty, the ultimate freedom. The empath, now whole and self-aware, can give love without losing themselves. They no longer rescue from fear or guilt. They offer compassion from strength. Their empathy becomes discerning rather than draining, grounded rather than reactive. They understand that love with boundaries is not less pure. It is more powerful. They are no longer defined by the pain that shaped them, but by the consciousness that freed them. This is the evolution of the awakened empath, the embodiment of Carl Jung's teaching that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Through every stage, from clarity to sovereignty, they realize that walking away silently is not abandonment, it is alignment. It is the soul's way of declaring that peace is no longer negotiable, and that true empathy begins, always, with the self. As we reflect on the stages of empathic individuation, let this moment remind you that silence is not weakness, it's sacred strength. Your presence here means you're awakening to your true spiritual power. Leave a comment. I am walking the path of the awakened empath as a declaration of your inner transformation. 4. The mirror and the unlived life. The empath's silence is not an escape. It is the purest reflection of truth. When the empath walks away, they don't just leave a room or a relationship. They leave behind a mirror that forces others to face their unlived life, the emotions they've buried, the lessons they've avoided, and the growth they've postponed. Their silence echoes louder than any confrontation, for it reveals what words can't disguise. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The empath's quiet withdrawal is that moment when fate meets truth, when the unconscious becomes undeniable. Their absence becomes a spiritual mirror, one that doesn't flatter, but exposes. In that mirror, others see the pain they projected, the love they mishandled, the parts of themselves they've long neglected. The empath, who once absorbed every storm with compassion, now stands still, no longer feeding what drains them. Their silence shakes the very foundation of those who depended on their energy, for it was the empath's light that once illuminated their darkness. Without that light, shadows become visible. This is not revenge for its divine equilibrium, a lesson of spiritual awakening delivered through energy, not words. When the empath stops explaining, the universe starts teaching. Silence becomes the teacher, and emptiness becomes the test. For those left behind, the experience is both haunting and holy. They begin to feel the gravity of what they lost, not just a person, but a sanctuary. The empath's peace was their shelter, their emotional safety net, the place where they could avoid their own chaos. When that energy is gone, the universe rushes in to fill the void, and it does so with fury, not out of cruelty, but correction. Life begins to mirror back every ignored truth, every avoided feeling, every abandoned dream. The unlived life demands attention. What was once suppressed now surfaces. Because energy can't be destroyed, it transforms. And silence is its most powerful form of transformation. For the empath, this withdrawal is sacred. It's not bitterness, it's liberation. It's a moment of reclaiming power through peace. Walking away silently means choosing alignment over attachment, growth over guilt, self-respect over people-pleasing. It's an act of profound spirituality, where compassion turns inward and the empath finally becomes their own healer. They realize that not every soul is meant to be saved. And sometimes, the most loving thing to do is to let others meet their own darkness. This is the deeper truth of spiritual awakening. It's not about fixing everyone else's pain, but allowing the universe to awaken them through consequence. In the quiet aftermath, those who once misunderstood the empath's love begin to understand its depth. The silence becomes their mirror of accountability. It whispers, "Look within." Without the empath's constant forgiveness, they're faced with their own unhealed wounds, their own patterns of avoidance. And this confrontation, though painful, is the universe's gift, the beginning of real transformation. The empath's silence is not the end of connection. It's the birth of awareness. It's the divine mirror that reveals the truth. What we refuse to heal in ourselves, we lose in others. And in that loss, both souls evolve, the empath through release and the other through awakening. 5. From wounded healer to sovereign empath. Many empaths spend years trying to heal others while quietly bleeding inside, mistaking service for salvation. They become what Carl Jung might call counterfeit wounded healers, souls who pour into others as a way to avoid their own shadows. They comfort, rescue, and absorb everyone's pain, believing that if they can save others, they can finally earn peace themselves. Yet true spirituality, true transformation, begins when the empath stops trying to mend everyone else's brokenness and instead turns inward to face the origin of their own wounds. This is where unconscious compulsion dissolves into conscious compassion, and pain becomes the raw material for wisdom. You begin to understand that not every cry for help is yours to answer. You realize that carrying other people's suffering doesn't heal them. It only buries you deeper in your own unhealed emotions. The empath's heart is pure, but purity without awareness becomes martyrdom. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, this means that the drive to rescue others often masks an older wound, the childhood ache of being unseen, unheard, or unloved unless you were useful. Healing begins when you stop repeating that pattern and dare to choose yourself without guilt. When the empath walks away, the silence is not emptiness, it is sacred. It's the moment your spirit declares, "Enough." Not from anger, but from awakening. You finally understand that love without boundaries is not love, it's self-erasure. Walking away becomes an act of spiritual rebellion, a reclamation of divine authority over your energy. And as you withdraw your light from those who misuse it, the universe stirs. It clears the stagnant attachments, the karmic loops, and the energy vampires that once thrived on your giving. This fury is not punishment, it's purification. It's the universe rearranging everything around you to match the frequency of your newfound sovereignty. Your compassion evolves from reaction to revelation. You no longer feel the urge to fix. You feel the power to witness. You can stand in the presence of pain without absorbing it, because your empathy has matured into discernment. The sovereign empath becomes a mirror, not a sponge. You reflect truth, you radiate calm, and your presence itself becomes medicine. Spiritual growth teaches you that the highest form of service is not rescuing, but embodying wholeness. Healing yourself is how you teach others to heal themselves. And so, the journey transforms. You no longer give out of fear or guilt. You give from overflow. You no longer chase connection. You attract resonance. You no longer apologize for your silence. You honor it as a language of power. The empath, who once rescued to survive, now creates to inspire. Your spirituality is no longer a wound dressed as kindness. It's a throne built from awareness. You stand, finally, not as the wounded healer, but as the sovereign empath, the one who has turned pain into power, compassion into clarity, and service into sacred choice. Before we step into the next stage of transformation, take a moment to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and join our community of awakened souls. Don't forget to like this video so you never miss the deep insights and teachings that illuminate your path toward higher consciousness. 6. The alchemical transformation. In the lens of spiritual wisdom, the empath's silent departure is not an act of weakness, but the beginning of alchemical transformation, the sacred process Carl Jung called individuation, where the human soul turns its darkness into light. Jung compared this journey to the stages of alchemy, beginning with nigredo, the blackening, when the old identity dies. For the empath, this is the death of the false self, the version of them who needed to please, fix, and heal others to feel worthy of love. It is the phase when everything that once defined them begins to crumble. The illusions, attachments, and emotional roles they once carried so gracefully now dissolve into nothingness. It feels like loss, yet it is the soul's first taste of freedom. As they surrender to this inner death, the process moves into albedo, the whitening. Here, the empath begins to cleanse the residue of old wounds, washing away the energies they absorbed from others. They start to see themselves not through the distorted mirror of other people's needs, but through the lens of truth. Light begins to return, fragile yet pure. The heart learns that compassion without boundaries is self-abandonment, and love without discernment is slavery. This purification is painful because it forces the empath to face what Jung called the shadow, the suppressed parts of themselves that longed for peace but were never allowed to rest. Then comes rubedo, the reddening the stage of rebirth and integration. This is when the empath, through solitude and silence, merges their light and shadow into one. They rise no longer as a wounded healer, but as a whole being who embodies balance, grace, and self-respect. They no longer give love to earn peace. They become peace itself. Their silence, once misunderstood, now speaks louder than words. It tells the world, I am no longer your source of validation or emotional refuge. I am my own sanctuary. When the empath walks away silently, the universe trembles, not in cruelty, but in correction. Energies, once fed by the empath's giving heart, are forced to confront their emptiness. Those who took their light for granted feel the absence like a storm. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that is exactly what the empath does. They stop waiting for others to see their worth and finally see it for themselves. This act of divine reclamation sends a shock wave through the energetic fabric of reality, a reminder that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. Through this sacred withdrawal, The empath becomes the alchemist of their own soul. The ashes of the old self give birth to gold, not material gold, but spiritual gold. Wisdom, authenticity, and peace. The universe may respond with fury at first, but soon it bows to this new vibration. For in truth, the empath's silence is not an ending. It is the sound of rebirth. It is the quiet declaration that the era of self-betrayal is over, and the age of self-realization, the true gift of spiritual wisdom and Carl Jung's greatest teaching, has begun. 7. Healing the mind-body split and the collective shadow. Chronic people-pleasing is the silent disease of the soul, a pattern that convinces you that love must be earned through sacrifice and exhaustion. You give endlessly, smoothing every edge, absorbing every storm, until your body begins to whisper the truth your mind refuses to hear through anxiety, fatigue, and illness. This isn't weakness. It's your nervous system crying for balance. The empath's sensitivity, once a gift, becomes a burden when it turns inward and poisons the body with other people's emotions. Yet the moment you begin to withdraw from the chaos, something powerful happens. You stop carrying what was never yours, and the universe itself responds. Not in punishment, but in sacred correction, because every time a soul chooses truth over tolerance, the scales of energy shift. As Carl Jung taught, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you stop being a vessel for the collective pain of others, you start returning emotional responsibility to its rightful owner. This act of reclaiming yourself is not selfish. It is holy. You become the mirror that forces others to see their own shadow, the one they've avoided facing while using your compassion as their hiding place. The universe does not allow imbalance forever. It restores order through spiritual awakening. Those who once drained you will feel the vacuum of your absence. Your silence becomes their teacher. Your distance becomes their mirror. And as the energy returns to you, your body begins to heal. Your mind begins to clear, and your soul starts breathing again. In that sacred stillness, the empath evolves from healer to awakened being. You realize that compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal, and giving without discernment is a slow death of the spirit. Spirituality is not about saving everyone. It's about remembering that light cannot exist without form. To heal the mind-body split, you must let your energy flow where it belongs, within your own heart, nurturing your own life force. Every time you say no to chaos, you are saying yes to harmony. Every time you walk away, you teach the world that peace cannot coexist with self-neglect. When you integrate your mind and body, your vitality returns like a river long blocked, finally finding its course. You begin to see that illness was never random. It was the body's final attempt to awaken the spirit. The empath's withdrawal is not abandonment. It's alchemy. It transforms pain into wisdom, dependency into power, and illusion into truth. In the silence of your separation, you are not losing connection. You are gaining clarity. You stop resonating with fear and begin vibrating with authenticity. This is spirituality in motion, the living embodiment of balance between the human and the divine. And as this inner alignment deepens, the universe aligns with you. Opportunities that once felt blocked start to flow. The people meant for you recognize your energy because it now speaks in the language of self-respect. The collective shadow may still roam, but it no longer finds refuge in you. You have remembered what true healing feels like, a peace that no longer depends on pleasing, a strength that does not need validation, and a love that begins, finally, with yourself. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Let the journey of healing the mind-body split and awakening the collective soul begin within you. Type in the comments, "I am healing, aligned, and divinely protected." 8. The sovereign empath and collective evolution. The empath's healing is not loud. It unfolds like light spreading through cracks in the collective soul. By choosing to live with integrity and conscious boundaries, you send ripples into the world, awakening others to the truth that spirituality is not about pleasing or saving others, but about remembering your divine worth. When you walk away in silence, it is not out of bitterness or revenge, it is revelation. Your silence becomes sacred, a mirror showing the world that authentic love never demands self-betrayal. You evolve from the wounded healer who overextends to the sovereign empath who gives from fullness, not depletion. You begin to embody the wisdom Carl Jung once shared. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. This choice to become whole is the purest act of spiritual growth. In your stillness, you reclaim energy that once leaked through endless empathy and unreciprocated care. You learn that peace does not mean avoiding others. It means no longer abandoning yourself to keep the peace. Each time you say no without guilt, you strengthen your spiritual backbone. Each time you honor your own boundaries, you realign with divine order. Those who once depended on your endless giving may feel discomfort, but that discomfort is part of their awakening. Your departure becomes their lesson in accountability, showing that love rooted in dependency must transform into love rooted in respect. You are not withdrawing love, you are refining it. The empath's quiet walk is not a retreat, it is a sacred revolution. You begin to notice how your body remembers what your heart forgot. The exhaustion after rescuing, the anxiety of being misunderstood, the ache of invisibility. Healing requires you to listen to the wisdom of your nervous system, to rest where you once rushed, to breathe where you once held tension. True spirituality lives here not in perfection, but in presence. You no longer need to explain your worth, for your peace speaks louder than your defense. Silence becomes your teacher. Detachment becomes your medicine. You start to feel that love flows more freely when it is not tied to approval, that compassion expands when it is not chained to control. As you rise into your sovereignty, you stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You begin to trust divine timing, understanding that the universe always supports those who choose authenticity over comfort. You may lose people who only loved your compliance, but you gain connection with those who honor your truth. Your evolution contributes to the collective's healing. Each empath who claims their power gives permission for others to do the same. In walking away, you teach through example that it is not cruelty to protect your peace. It is sacred duty. Let your quiet strength be the vibration that changes the room. Let your self-respect be the prayer that guides others back to theirs. The sovereign empath does not seek validation. They radiate alignment. And in doing so, you become a living testament that spirituality is not escape from reality, but the transformation of it. Through your courage, you show that love without self-sacrifice is not selfish, it is divine. When an empath walks away silently. The world around them begins to tremble, not out of revenge, but because balance is being restored. Every time you choose peace over chaos, the universe rearranges itself in your favor. Remember, silence is not weakness, it's wisdom in motion. The universe always responds to authenticity with divine precision. If this message resonated with your soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos on Carl Jung, spirituality, and awakening. Your journey toward higher consciousness is just beginning. Stay connected, stay awakened,